Hello and welcome. 9 books, 9 readers, 9 authors. Let me welcome you to a wonderful literary treat. This is a virtual feast served by a bunch of friends who are former schoolmates of Holy Angels Convent, Thiruvananthapuram. They're going to talk about books that have fascinated them, and they cut across a variety of genres. In one of them, a British novelist lets us into an espionage set in France, while in another, a US-based woman author reimagines the world's greatest epic for us. The tour de force novel of a towering Japanese writer is so rich and vivid, you need to sip it like vintage wine. Stunning debut novel of a writer that's been shortlisted for this year's Booker Prize has a female narrator telling us about the stormy relationship that she had with her mother, a Pulitzer-winning writer based in the US of Indian origin, talks about family bonds in the backdrop of a tumultuous period in Indian history. An Australian writer's book is set in Nazi Germany. It interweaves love, language, and identity, and reveals the quest for freedom. Now, freedom of expression is again at the core of a dystopian novel, which many consider as one of the greatest of the 20th century. We do have a novel which is entirely poetry, set in California. And finally, a book which is non-English. Its protagonist is a strong woman who happens to be in a profession, a very rare profession, that of the hangwoman. So folks, enjoy your coffees, sit back and listen to these audio clips. Thank you.
I'm Sangeetha Panicker. I live in Trivandrum. If you love eerie coincidences, unexpected twists and turns, haunting and unforgettable characters, and a lot of soul searching, then Haruki Murakami's Kafka on the Shore is the book for you. In 1978, Murakami was watching a baseball game when Dave Hilton, an American, came to bat. And the instant that he hit a double, Murakami suddenly realized that he could write a novel. He went home and began writing that night. Such a simple beginning to one of the most profound writing one could ever read. To quote a few lines from this book, published in 2002 and translated to English 3 years later. Once the storm is over, you won't remember how you made it through, how you managed to survive. You won't even be sure, in fact, whether the storm is really over. But one thing is certain. When you come out of the storm, you won't be the same person who walked in. That's what the storm's all about. Lines we all can identify with. This book cannot be confined to a particular genre and is a blend of metaphysics, fiction, realism, fantasy, and even suspense. It actually connects to us on an intuitive level. The protagonist is a regular teenager who loves reading and listening to music. Everything changes when he runs away from home to escape a prophecy. The seemingly unimportant people he meets later on becomes crucial for the plot. Another main character is Nakata, who is a simple old man who has even the ability to talk to cats. He goes on an undisclosed mission which entwines his destiny with the protagonist. So there are actually 2 parallel stories running in an intriguing manner, and it goes back and forth, keeping the pace taut. Some of the things that you will find common in almost all Murakami's books are cats, running, Japanese food, and wells. Nakata is helped by a truck driver, Hoshino, At one point, Hoshino even surprises you with his newly found love for Beethoven's Archduke Trio, which he comes across in a cafe. I was intrigued and went on to listen to Archduke Trio, and when I happened to look at the comments, I realized mostly all of them were there after reading this book. So is the impact of these characters on us. Oshima, an intellectual who comes up with these sudden thoughts which are deep and profound. Johnny Walker with his top hat and tailcoat. Colonel Sanders with his familiar goatee. Two soldiers apparently unaged since World War II are all characters who are depicted with great attention. All in all, it is very difficult to put this book down once you start reading it. I hope you will enjoy the book as much as I did. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ciny Joy and I live in San Ramon, California. The book I picked for today is The Book Thief by Markus Zusak, which I believe is a must-read for all book lovers. Reading aloud with my daughter is my favorite nighttime activity, and historical fiction is my favorite genre. So this book was an easy pick for me. Historical fiction about Germany and World War II are plenty, but this book stands out as one that shows it from the Germans' perspective. As someone who spent her early childhood in Germany, it resonated so much with some of the stories that I had heard from friends that we very rarely hear about outside of Germany. This book, by Australian writer Markus Zusak, captures readers' attention from the get-go by picking a very unique narrator for the story, Death. Death, a very appropriate storyteller for the times, but a death that is not the usual villain, but a kinder, gentler enigma that deeply analyzes the feelings of its victims and the people around. While Death is the narrator, the book is primarily about the little girl Liesel Memminger, the book thief, and her life as a German orphan in 1939. Liesel has several interesting characters in her life, like her foster parents, Hans and Rose, Max, a Jew they give shelter to, the mayor's wife, who knowingly lets Liesel steal her books, and her friend Rudy. Zusak has said that writing the book was inspired by two real-life events related to him by his German parents, the bombing of Munich, and a teenage boy offering bread to an emaciated Jew being marched through the streets, ending with both boy and the Jewish prisoner being whipped by a soldier. It is, however, how Zusak combines all the sad and terrible events with such wonderful and believable characters, and how he completely immerses you in their everyday lives, that makes this a very special read. The Book Thief is a highly emotional book, and if you are anything like me, have a handkerchief ready. But in the end, it's a story that leaves you with hope. A hope for all the little Liesels in this world, who will not only survive the brutalities of this world, but also imbibe the goodness around and grow into good and generous people. I want to leave you by paraphrasing a question Death has at the end of the book that baffles me every day. How is that the human race could be so ugly and so glorious, and its words and stories so damning and brilliant at the same time? Thank you.
Hello friends, I'm Varghese and I'm from Trivandrum. I would like to give a brief review of The Caravan to Vaccares, a classic adventure book written by one of the foremost adventure novelists, Alistair MacLean. Sadly, the author passed away in 1987 after a prolific career. Caravan to Vaccares is a tale that is written around the region of Provence. Groups of gypsies from all over Europe, especially from behind the Iron Curtain, come on an annual pilgrimage to the holy shrine of their patron saint in the southern region of France. But this year something is very different, as there are suspicious deaths. The main character is Neil Bowman, who is investigating the murders, though that is not very clear at the beginning and becomes clear only as the story unfolds. His lady interest is Cecil. The villain seems to be a wealthy aristocrat, Charles de Croiter. He's supposed to be the leading folklorist on the gypsies. He visits the region every year at the same time. He's also a gastronome. His lady interest is Leela Delafont, who also happens to be Cecil's friend. In addition, we have Sarada, who is the main henchman, among a host of other henchmen who carries out activities on behalf of the villain. The whole set of characters follow the caravans as they go from place to place. It is during this trip Bowman and Cecil realize that their lives are in danger, and this forms the crux of the story. Their efforts to uncover the secrets which the gypsies are determined to hide is the theme. But the story ends with a twist that forces you to read till the end to understand. The book is a classic Alistair MacLean. There is very little of the context mentioned at the start. The story starts abruptly and continues almost in the same vein throughout the book. It is left to the reader to piece the different pieces of the story as it evolves. The storyline is simple but travels at a high pace from beginning till end. But what makes it a very interesting read beyond these is the way the characters are portrayed. The heroes and villains come across almost like normal people in this story, not superhumans. But there are layers to them that are slowly peeled away as the story unfolds. The other interesting aspect is the way in which the villain is portrayed. It is not through his villainous actions, but through his eating habit. He seems like a glutton, but eats with a passion. The food he eats and the description of the food is what makes you think, even without anything else being said, that you are in the presence of the villain. The last is a description of the location where the action takes place. The descriptions of the desolation of the place is remarkable that you can almost picture yourself there. They're very evocative without being poetical. The highlight of the book is a description of a bullfight in which the main protagonist is fighting for his life. You can almost picture yourself sitting, gripping the arms of the chair as part of the audience. For children growing up in a period that is very different, this book gives you a view of Europe, the Iron Curtain, and the challenges of the Cold War. The hero is someone we can associate with, and that is what makes the book very easy for children in their teens to read and enjoy. While there is violence, this does not come across as an adult book. Hope you take the time to read it or encourage your children to read the book. They will love it and fall in love with the author as well. Thank you.
Hi friends, this is Ranjana. I live in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. The book I'm going to speak about today is The Lowland by Jhumpa Lahiri. This book is set in the 1960s in Calcutta. The book revolves around the story of Udyan and Subhash, two brothers who are 1 year apart. Subhash is quite the studious one, very focused on his life's goals. And Udyan, in sharp contrast, is a very active person in student politics, and he gets drawn into Naxal movements. Subhash proceeds to Rhode Island on a scholarship to study science, and he returns to Calcutta only when his brother is executed by the police. He comes to be of support to his parents but ends up rescuing his brother's pregnant widow Gauri. Not only that, he struggles to convince her the need for them to get married, from reasons ranging to providing a comfortable home to the to-be-born child to fulfillment of Gauri's dreams to study philosophy. The emotional baggage that Gauri carries and the impact of that on the rest of the roles that she has to perform, it runs through the decades, a few decades after that, and the story kind of moves on very predictable lines. Now, what I liked about the story is the way the author has avoided elaborate conversations, very emotional ones, to convey the struggle that Gauri, who is a woman much ahead of her time, undergoes. So we come to know of these through a craft which is very unique to Jhumpa, and that is that is only through a narrator's voice that we understand, and we understand it completely. There are no lacuna in that. Now, what I like other than that about this book is The Lowland is quite a symbol that connects the two brothers. It is that narrow strip of land which connects two ponds. It is evident only through through the summers, and in monsoon they are submerged. Actually, all of us, throughout our lives, we carry those small strips of land or some icon in our life that we would have come across in our early stages of life, and we try to find reflections of that in the rest of our journey of life. The same happens with these characters, and I guess all of us can relate to that. So for me, Lowland represents the unseen, unraveled, yet deep identities that we carry within ourselves, irrespective of what we do. The feelings that are evoked when we try to see the same in the rest of the journey would depend on the kind of experiences that we would have undergone, but they remain there as icons and imparting a part to our identity. I loved this book, and I'm sure all of you would, so I strongly recommend it. Thanks.
Hi friends, I'm Sarada Narayanan, now staying at Hyderabad. Today I'm talking about The Palace of Illusions by Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni. This book was published in 2008, but I got to read it in 2012. Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni was not my favorite till I read this book. I picked this book from a nearby lending library just because I got fascinated by the name of the book and the characters of Mahabharata in it. As I started reading the book, I thought I would return the book the next day itself. It was so dragging, but after a few pages, I just could not keep the book down. I still remember making dosas for my kids with this book in my left hand. Almost all of us know the story of Mahabharata. The story of Mahabharata is more focused on the Pandavas and the Kauravas. But I always felt the game changers in it were the women. Satyavati, Amba, Kunti, Gandhari, Draupadi, to name a few. This book has been written by the author with Draupadi as a central character, or we can say from the point of view of Draupadi. Starting with her birth, every incident in her life is unique and unusual. Born out of fire, married to 5 men, disrobed in an open court, and in the end left alone to die by her 5 husbands. This book narrates the journey of Draupadi from a sweet, bubbly child to a young girl, to a dignified wife and then a loving mother. Her emotions are very well captured in a dignified way. Draupadi always feels lonely, even when she is born with a brother and being married to 5 brothers. She is in search of companionship. Her bonding with Krishna needs a special mention here. This book gives a new outlook about Draupadi to the readers. You get a feel that your questions about Draupadi are answered. Even though we know the story of Mahabharata, this book kindles your curiosity. I would definitely recommend this book as a read to anyone. Thank you, friends.
Hi friends, my name is Vinod Nair. I live in Seattle, United States. I'm going to talk about the book named 1984 by the famous author George Orwell. Before I talk about the book, I would like to say a few words about the author. George Orwell's real name was Eric Blair. He served in the Imperial Police in Burma and did not like the British oppression of India. More significantly, he experienced the events leading up to the Second World War, the fight against the communist and fascist regimes. So it's safe to surmise that all these experiences formed the background to his hatred of totalitarianism, which is the context of 1984. Couple more things about George Orwell. He's the only writer whose last name has become an adjective. Orwellian is used to describe a political system in which the government tries to control every part of people's life. 1984 is a political fiction that takes place in London. London in the book is in a depressing state. It's run by a totalitarian government headed by Big Brother, another phrase coined by George Orwell and widely used now. London under Big Brother has a lot of restrictions. You're not allowed to have close friends, not allowed to date, not allowed to have private thoughts, not allowed to write a diary, and so on. The main character, Winston Smith, is a low-rung party worker. Winston hates the government but understands the repercussions of talking about it. He's very suspicious of his co-worker, a lady named Julia. He thinks Julia is a government informer. He also admires a party leader named O'Brien, who he thinks is secretly fighting against the party from within the party. One day, Winston receives a note from Julia which says, "I love you." What happens next? Do they have an affair? Do they get caught? Is O'Brien a good guy? Is Winston able to defeat Big Brother and the party? That's what 1984 is all about. Two things stand out as you read this book. One is the fact that Big Brother is constantly erasing and rewriting those sections of the history which are not favorable to the party. This reminds you of the tendency today to rename buildings and roads and destroy statues if we don't think we like what those names or people stood for. Do we need to rewrite or erase history if it is bad, if we think it is bad? Why not let it stay as bad so we can learn from it, our kids can learn from it? The other thing is how much today's technology will let any government easily do what 1984 is talking about. What was fiction then is a reality today. Nothing we do today is private. What you read, what you buy, what you search for are all information that a government can get to if needed. Orwell warns us that totalitarianism, if not fought against, could come into place even in strong democracies. 1984 is not only an engrossing fiction, but also makes you wonder whether today's nationalistic tendencies could eventually lead to a totalitarian state. Hope you get a chance to read 1984 if you have not already. Thank you for listening.
Hello everyone. I am Anitha Nair from Trivandrum, Kerala. And really this is a refreshing activity for me to do, especially during the lockdown days, since doing a book review makes one delve deeper into the book. I came upon Avni Doshi's Girl in White Cotton, also I think it is known as Burnt Sugar, through a Facebook group, and noticed that it has been nominated for the Booker Prize. I generally like reading books by Indian writers and decided to try this one out. The book narrates the story of a troubled mother-daughter relationship and is set in Pune, Maharashtra. The main character is Antara, who has never understood her mother well. Throughout the book, she goes back and forth in her memories, and the innermost emotions of a woman sometimes come out as a rude shock for the reader. Antara had a tough, unstable childhood with her mother, Tara, who rebels against societal norms. Tara walks out of her marriage with her little daughter and spends her time in an ashram with a guru. Little Antara is quite lost in the ashram while her mother sets into a relationship with the guru. Her only solace is Kali Mata, who is a devotee from the US and who looks after little Antara quite well. After the relationship ends, Tara and Antara finds themselves out in the street begging. They are rescued by Tara's parents and Antara is put in a boarding school. Here also, as a teacher, I could relate to Antara's sufferings in the school with her teachers. The story also has other characters like her husband, Dilip, her Nani, and Dilip's mother. Finally, Tara starts suffering from memory loss and Antara desperately searches a way to make peace with their shared past. This is Doshi's debut novel, and the language used is quite dark at times, I would say. Her deeper feelings during her pregnancy and childbirth is quite unconventional and may be the truth. There is no immediate love gushing out during childbirth, which is quite opposite to the cliche feelings we are generally used to. And also, on a personal note, I could relate well with the main character. Maybe that is why I took up this book. I never had a peaceful childhood. We were always fighting, myself and my mother. So, but finally, now I really regret some of those fights. So, the book took me a week to complete, and I would rate the book high and recommend it as a good read since it is honest and realistic. So that's it about Girl in White Cotton, and thanks for listening.
Hello friends, this is Bina Pillai and I'm from Toronto, Canada. I'm doing an English review for a Malayalam novel named Arachar, written by K.R. Meera. This novel was awarded the prestigious Vailar Award, Odukurul Award and Kerala Sahitya Academy Award. Some books have to be read, others have to be experienced. This book falls under the latter category. The storyline is very unconventional and the narration is stormy. And it can overwhelm the reader with several intense emotions. Set in Kolkata and sometime close to the present day, protagonist Chetna is from Gridda Malik clan. Now this is a family of hangmen who trace their professional lineage back to 400 BC. Her father is 88-year-old veteran of 451 hangings, but he's considered too old to do the job by the government. So the mantle of hangman is thrust upon Chetna's shoulder. The book is entwined richly in history. It keeps going back to the life and times of Chetna's ancestors. Being a history buff myself, these historic narrations did not bore me at all. Apparently, the novelist stayed for a significant period of time in West Bengal to collect authentic historic data that she used in these references. When Chetna is appointed as the first woman executioner in India, her life transforms overnight. As a woman executioner, her new rise to fame follows a whirlwind of media frenzy. Her life is turned into a primetime news hour slot by Sanjeev Kumar Mitra. That is the man she grows to love. When the novelist deals with Chetna's ancestors, you need to really keep up with it because sometimes it's a bit confusing which ancestor that the novelist is talking about. But that makes the novel beautiful and at times challenging as well. The novel also deals with poverty, gender, society, and media manipulation. Death looms in every page. It leaves a dark trail throughout the novel. But even when dealing with something as gruesome and depressing as hanging and death, the novelist does it in a very elegant way. It shocks you, but it doesn't disgust you. There are ample references to hanging and nooses. Chetna too talks about how she was born and her umbilical cord was tied into a noose. She describes that as a perfect noose that she tied even back then. Her love for Sanjay in the course of the novel changes and she starts to detest him, which culminates in an unexpected, surprising end to the story. The intensity of this book is sometimes overwhelming, but even when you feel you cannot bear to read another word, you just cannot set the book aside. I took it with me on my beach vacation and was not expecting to finish it, but it surprised me. I finished it in 2 days. Read it because it is so offbeat, especially for Meera's description of the gallows and the final process of the job of hanging. It's an offbeat book about an offbeat profession with an offbeat climax. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Biju Parameswaran and I am from Thiruvananthapuram. There are few books that I reread, and Vikram Seth's The Golden Gate is one of them. This is a book that I often dip into. I open a page at random and feel rejuvenated reading it. Curiously, It's also the only novel that I've read that is completely in verse. 600 stanzas of rhyming poetry make up the 300 pages of the book. The Calcutta-born Seth wrote The Golden Gate during the days when he pursued higher studies at Stanford. It came out in 1986 when he was 34. Seth is a polyglot with vast and deep knowledge of music and many languages, and proven prowess in forms of writing like poetry, novel, play, libretto, biography, and children's literature. I treasure the moment when I met him during the Hay Festival in Thiruvananthapuram in 2010. Seth is an affable man who endears himself to his legion fans. The Golden Gate is set in San Francisco in the 1980s. The protagonists are a group of friends, John, Janet, Liz, Phil, and Ed. Ed's pet iguana and Liz's cat are prominent players in the plot as well. Seth thrills us with an amazing wordplay peppered with clever similes, fun rhymes, and vivid imagery. The novel runs the whole gamut of emotions of love, possessiveness, betrayal, sorrow, rapprochement, death, and importantly, hope. We have profound musings on nuclear disarmament, world peace, and the survival of the planet for which the Silicon Valley provides the perfect backdrop. There's youth unrest manifested in protest marches. It is lighter passages, and there are several, that had mean splits. Debates ensue about the pros and cons of keeping an iguana for a pet, or the merits and evil doings of the cat, which threatens to rock the boat of the John-Liz relationship. A couple of pages are a celebration of Tintin comics. At one point, John exposits in hilarious detail against having babies. Elsewhere, we are enlightened about how cooking is an act of cruelty, awash with images of torture like whipping cream, beating eggs, and stoning cherries. Ed, who is gay, raises existential questions on religion and the nature and pursuit of love. He battles inner demons of unbridled passion. The novel made me sit up and ruminate on the hollowness of conventional morality. I feel the disorientation of the 80s American youth holds good even today, everywhere, making the book a relevant read even now. I'm however surprised that the bold experiment with form, namely the verse novel, has not spawned any imitators yet, more than 3 decades on. Thank you.